Yep, we're good.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. I'd like to call the October 1st, 2020 West Sacramento Planning Commission meeting to order. We continue to meet via teleconference pursuant to Governor's Executive Order N2920, by which members of the Planning Commission and staff are participating via live video conference to reduce the spread of COVID-19 virus. Members of the public have been invited to watch the meeting via wave cable on our local channel 20 or streaming online through the city's website. Tonight's agenda and all agenda item materials are available on the city's website on the Planning Commission page. All public comments submitted by 5 p.m. via email to the Planning Commissioner clerk are available for consideration and are also posted on the city's website, along with the agenda and link to the live streaming video of this meeting, so that all planning commissioners and community members can see the complete text and submittal information. The Planning Commissioner clerk will note the comments for each item. This evening, we're also joined by Commissioner Vu. Thank you, welcome, and thanks for filling in. So with that, we can proceed to the agenda. First up is the General Administration Function Part 1, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Commission. Mr. Clerk, are there any comments on this section?
There's no public comment for item number 1.
Okay, moving on to Part 1B, correspondence and staff communications from the Planning Commissioner Secretary, Mr. Tilley.
Yes, just one item to note for the Commission tonight. Via email earlier today, you should have received a short memo from Kathy Allen regarding the Project Kind that's on our agenda tonight. It had some short clarifications of a few matters that were in your staff report. So if anyone doesn't have that, we can shoot that over to you right away.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is disclosure of ex parte communication. At this point, planning commissioners should disclose any communications that they've had regarding items on the agenda. Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda, which is consideration and approval of the minutes from the September 17th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting.
I'll move to approve them.
Moved by Commissioner Sablon.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Leonard. All in favor, please. Oh, sorry, old habit. Mr. Clerk, can you please do a roll call vote?
Commissioner Strumfeld?
Aye.
Commissioner Vu?
Aye.
Commissioner Leonard?
Aye.
Commissioner Sablon?
Aye.
Commissioner Austin?
Aye.
Commissioner Berliner?
Abstain.
Chair Liebig?
Aye. Thank you. Okay, moving along quickly on to the regular agenda. Let's see, there are 3 items under the regular agenda. We're on item number 3, which is public hearing regarding the proposed development agreements and conditional use permits for cannabis distribution and manufacturing at 1645 Parkway Boulevard, Suite A. And before I pass it over to city staff, I'll ask Mr. Clerk if there are any public comments on this item.
There are no public comments on this item.
Okay, with that, Ms. Allen, I will hand it over to you.
Good evening, Chair Liebig and members of the Commission. This project is a cannabis project and includes 2 conditional use permit applications and development agreements for cannabis distribution and cannabis manufacturing. The project is located at 1645 Parkway Boulevard, Suite A in the heavy industrial zone. It's located in a building which contains 2 suites, with this applicant taking one of them. And the suite size is approximately 7,500 square feet. As with all our other cannabis projects, no customers would visit the facility. Their vehicles would be unmarked, etc. In addition to our community development staff who looked at the application, it's been thoroughly vetted by both police and fire. The applicant has been working very closely with staff from the PD on their security plan for the project, and the safety and security plan will need to be approved by PD prior to operation of the business. Surrounding businesses in this area, it is in a heavy industrial area, are uses such as manufacturing, freight distribution. There's a large produce distribution facility close by, as well as some smaller industrial uses. Staff has not received any inquiries from surrounding businesses from our mailing that we did prior to the project. And that concludes my presentation. The applicant is here and can answer questions should you have any of him, although he doesn't have a formal presentation for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. With that, I will go ahead and open the public hearing at this point. And I will ask commissioners if they have any questions of staff. At this point, there is no presentation tonight. So questions of staff or questions of the applicant.
A question for staff.
Go ahead.
Since we've seen so many cannabis proposals over the years, have there been any substantive changes at the state level that would affect the form and the format of our separate development agreements? I ask that just because when we read these development agreements, they're quite detailed, and we presume that everything is current and vetted. But just curious if you can characterize if there have been any changes at that level, and if there are things that we need to be watching out for with development agreements in general.
That is one thing that I know the city attorney's office keeps an eye on for us and keeps us apprised of changes over the course of time. There has been a little bit of evolution with our development agreements on these projects as changes have come along.
Yes, that basically sums it up. We keep an eye on that and we make changes as they arise. So far, there's been nothing kind of earth-shattering that's happened, and we have, as was just said, made a couple small tweaks over the years to the DA that you guys are looking at here tonight.
Very good. Thank you.
Chair Liebig, if I may.
Actually, Commissioner Vu, Commissioner Austin had his hand up, and then Commissioner Sablon, and then I'll come to Commissioner Vu. So, Andrew. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
I totally called you out wrong. Commissioner Sternfels.
You can be Commissioner Austin tonight. That's fine.
Commissioner Sternfels, then Sablon, and then Vu.
I just want to do a quick check with city staff. I know the last time we had an applicant come before us, we raised the question on kind of what is the status of all the applications that have come before us? How many applicants are actually in business operations versus the number applied? And so the city staff could provide us just a little bit of an update on like, what are the number of the applicants we've approved that are actually in operations now versus which ones are still out there?
Yeah, it's definitely a minority of the ones that have come before the Planning Commission have got to the operational stage. I think right now, going off memory, I believe we have 4 businesses that are operational currently. They're doing distribution primarily. Others are they're still in the pipeline, but this industry as a whole is certainly struggling to adjust to the regulated market. And COVID certainly has not helped in that regard. But when one of our businesses, as a matter of fact, her building just burned down. So we had to, so she just certainly was sort of back to square one on that one. But for the ones that are operational, they continue to follow what's in the development agreements. remitting their revenue payments, keeping their safety and security plans going. We're in regular communication with all of them, especially with our police. They'd like to pay them a visit every now and then just to see how things are going. So yes, it has been a minority of the ones that we have approved that have become operational, but the ones that have made it to that stage seem to be doing all right and following all of the conditions in their use permits and the requirements in their development agreement.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Sablon.
So I just have a quick question on the quarterly payments. Are the percentages set by ordinance or by statute, or is there discretion on the city's part on what that percentage is?
The percentages are called out as actually a condition in the DA. That's where they're set at. But they are a set amount for each different type of cannabis project. So like all the distribution ones have the same percentage, and all the manufacturing ones have the same percentage.
Okay, and are we tied into those percentages by use, or is there discretion per application? So I'm just asking because in the proposal, the applicant's proposal, they propose doing 5% of gross receipts without distinction on the use. So I was just wondering, if they're proposing 5%, why we're doing 2.5 on one use and then the step down on the other use to 2.5.
That was the amounts that was decided on by the city when these projects since we first started doing them. It was looked at by our cannabis committee, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, but I believe they were vetted through the council as well in terms of the percentages.
Yeah, and the percentages really reflected what our research was when we first started off on this about the business model of the different types of cannabis operations, and what their margins would be, because distribution and manufacturing, yes, they might be evolving the same commodity, but it's really not apples and apples. So that's sort of how we've identified it, and those percentages have remained consistent throughout all of the development agreements that have come before this commission, which I think now has been over 4 years worth of seeing these.
Okay, thank you. So we typically don't change those numbers then, is what I'm hearing.
Correct.
We wouldn't change those here under the Planning Commission. So when it comes to taxes and fees, although we get to see the development agreement, sort of what's behind it, but that side of it is a little outside of the purview of the Planning Commission. But we do get to see it as part of the agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Boo.
No, Commissioner Sturmfeld had the same question I did.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up. Are there any, Mr. Leonard?
Just a fast one. I see that the plans seem fairly well along. Have they submitted for building permit, or are they able to, or do we have any idea about their intention on timing?
They have not submitted for their building permits yet. We generally don't recommend to applicants that they do that until after they've gone through and gotten their development agreement approved. But I agree with you, theirs are pretty far along. I'm not sure of the applicant's actual timing in terms of how quickly after approval they intend to submit for their building permits.
Any other questions before I close the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you, applicants, for being available, and bring it back to the commission for any final discussion before we move forward. And Vice Chair Austin.
Liebig, did we make sure that the applicants, if they had any input to put in before we close the public hearing?
I didn't have a presentation, and I didn't hear any questions of the applicant, and I don't believe we've changed the project proposal. Is there something I'm missing that we should go back and get clarification on?
I don't believe so. I just want to make sure the applicant had their opportunity.
Okay, if they want to nod and wave their hand, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll just keep it closed.
We're good. We're good. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Vice Chair Austin.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the discussion from the commissioners. So I'll just share a little bit of perspective. I appreciate Chair Liebig's comment that fees are outside of the purview of the decision of the Planning Commission, but I do want staff to note some of the questions and concerns that have been raised. I personally trust that staff are making a judicious decision around examining fees, and just to take that into consideration as they look at DAs in the future. And then I also want to note that we also raised concerns about the number of approved conditional use permits in contrast to the number of properties or projects or projects or businesses that have moved forward. And so we've done this in the past, kind of looked at you know, how many, like kind of how many have been approved versus how many are currently active. And I'll just note that because there's such a discrepancy, I don't want to make things more difficult on business owners, but I wonder if we should examine our general policy on maybe shortening the term of the time of how long we approve these. I do not recommend it on this particular project. I want to be clear about that. And the reason for that is when I'm looking at making decisions, I'm really concerned about the sort of speculative nature of some of these applicants. And while, you know, certainly someone who is investing in a new business has what we call, you know, skin in the game, they can end up tying up properties that can be used for other businesses. And so that's something that I have a concern about. And so I don't want there to be adverse economic impacts for our city because folks are speculating and perhaps they don't have the financial means or the wherewithal to meet the policy regulations for this emerging industry. So I just wanted to note that. So when I'm looking at approving a CUP and a development agreement for cannabis projects, there's a couple things that I look at. The very first thing that I look at is the strength of the project team. I think that's something, the reason I look at that is, do I think that this team really have the wherewithal to move forward on a project? And the second thing that I look at is the location of the development and whether there'll be adverse effects to the community. And in this case, I feel like the applicant seems really strong. They're experienced and they've operated for several years, similar projects in other areas. And I do think that this is an appropriate location for this particular type of business. And so I'm generally supportive of staff recommendation at this time.
Okay. Any other comments? David, do you have any feedback on that, or do you want to provide any feedback?
Yeah, I just know the last time we looked at when it was raised several cannabis projects ago about how much of our industrial space, you know, was sort of being dedicated to cannabis. I recall at that time it was less than 5% in terms of square footage. So I suspect we're not much more than that now based on the ones that we have come. Most of these businesses they're pretty small. They're 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square feet. This one is 7,500. But, you know, compared to some of the 500,000 square foot buildings, you know, that we have in town and are getting more of, they really do represent by square footage a really small piece of our industrial pie.
Thanks for sharing that, Mr. Tilley. Dr. Tilley, Andrew,
Dr. Tilley rolls.
Austin.
Okay, yeah, my only concern, and just as we consider this, is the regulatory process is clearly taking a long time. And so, this is, I've often referred to this as the starting line. And I've seen projects, walk away from planning commission meetings in huge celebration mode. And I've just, I feel terrible saying, good luck. This is the starting line, not the finish line. So there's a long road ahead of them before they open their doors. And I want to make sure that we do give them their opportunity to actually succeed and open their doors rather than cutting them off prematurely. Okay, thank you. Good conversation, everyone. And with that, we can move on to a vote.
Chair Liebig, I move staff recommendation on item 3.
Moved by Vice Chair Austin.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Vu. Mr. Clerk, can you please do a roll call vote?
Commissioner Austin?
Aye.
Commissioner Berliner?
Aye. So did you get that?
Yeah, I got it. Commissioner Sternfeld?
Aye.
Commissioner Vu?
Aye.
Commissioner Leonard?
Aye.
Commissioner Sablon?
Aye.
Chair Liebig?
Aye. Okay, thank you. Passes unanimously. And thank you for joining us this evening. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is number 4, public workshop regarding the Kind residential project located at 620 4th Street. And before I turn this over to staff, Mr. Clerk, are there any public comments on this item?
There are no public comments on this item.
Okay, with that, Ms. Allen, this one is also yours.
All righty. Ben, can you call up the PowerPoint for me? Next slide, Ben. So tonight, staff is presenting a workshop for you on the Kind project, which is a project for 148 studio apartment units, which would be located in 2 buildings at the southwest corner of 4th and F Street in Washington. In addition to the buildings, the project includes recreational amenities located in the project's outdoor areas, which includes items such as ping pong tables, outdoor grills, an outdoor gym, dog area, and veggie planter. It also includes 39 parking spaces. Next slide. The project has a cornucopia of entitlements that are requested on it, starting with design review for the project. It also needs minor deviations from the Washington specific plan, a zoning administrator approval for reduction in parking, and they're also requesting a development agreement for the project. Design review is an item that will be reviewed by the Planning Commission. In this case, due to the fact there are other entitlements on the project. In discussing that, per my memo, I apologize, there was a mistake regarding the project description in terms of the materials used. This project, unlike what's in your staff report, actually the materials include plaster walls of contrasting colors, which will add visual interest. It also has metal railings, has a metal stairway on each end of the project, and includes metal fencing and gating. The units each have wooden doors. In addition to the recreational amenities that I mentioned earlier, there will also be 39 parking spaces located in a surface parking lot. The applicant, like so many of our other applicants in Washington in recent years, is requesting minor deviations from the setback requirements. As the Planning Commission has heard before, our Washington specific plan is very outdated at this point. It was adopted in 1996 and does not reflect the urban area that Washington is, and the land use designations contained within General Plan 2035, which call for a much higher density and urban development on our infill parcels. In terms of the zoning administrator request for parking reduction, this project is going to have 39 parking spaces. The Washington specific plan would actually require of this project to have 80-something parking spaces. They're actually requesting a reduction of 42 spaces. This project is very close to major transit, and so staff feels comfortable with the zoning administrator request on that. Economic development and housing has been working very closely with the applicant on this to address some of the impact fees for this project. The impact fees are much more geared towards a suburban-based project over a very dense urban project, and hence economic development and housing has been working on finding ways to address that item. Next slide, Ben. Next slide, sorry, one more. So now we're getting into what the project actually looks like. This is what the project would look like from the F Street elevation. Next slide, Ben. This is their courtyard area between the two buildings. Next. Next slide, Ben. So this is the view from 4th Street, looking from their parking area. Can you back up one? Thanks. It shows between the parking area and the buildings is where their recreation area is, and shows how some of those items would look viewing the project from 4th Street. Final slide, Ben. And so this is, so one thing I meant to mention in terms of the amenities for this project was that it's going to be an all electric project. It will be solar ready. It's going to be made of sustainable building materials. and it is considered a sustainable by design project, all of which are items which we feel are items in the mayor's climate change agenda that are very positive things. And this just shows the schedule, the hearing schedule for the project, both for Planning Commission, which we anticipate being the first meeting in November, and the 2 council hearings for the DA. That does conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions. The applicant is here and I believe does have a presentation for you. Happy to talk about this project. Oh, and there's also staff from Economic Development here if you should have questions from them as well.
Hi, Kathy. Can we keep the presentation up for just a moment?
Sure.
Commissioner Berliner has a question. I just want to make sure that we don't change things.
I have so many questions about this, so I wanted to like jump up on it, but I will wait for the applicant to do their presentation, and then I'll ask all my questions. I just wanted to make sure I had my hand in.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure we didn't jump around too much. All right. Thank you, Kathy. And I think that's a general good leeway to the next step. So this is a workshop. This isn't a hearing, but I'm going to open up the public comment period. And I believe we can invite the applicant to give their presentation.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Young. I'm the president of Urban Elements, and we're a local developer here in the Sacramento area specializing in urban infill. My partner on the project is Fulcrum Properties, and Fulcrum Properties and Urban Elements are teaming on this project to try to address issues of attainable housing. And the premise of the project really started from the idea of the KIND project being, how do we mitigate costs on this project and attempt to deliver something that is beautiful, but is a living environment that enables a lower point of entry for workforce housing. So the project has been designed. In fact, we've spent 18 months on this overall project, and I really have to applaud the city of West Sac at the economic development level, the planning level, building and engineering. It's been a very iterative process, and we really appreciate just the creativity and forward thinking of your team. It's very remarkable to me. I've worked nationally and specifically on the West Coast from Seattle to Phoenix, delivering over 120 projects in the last 8 to 10 years. And in every jurisdiction, I have really never seen the innovation that I've seen coming from West Sacramento. So this has been really empowering to try to help solve housing security for a lot of people that are kind of vulnerable at this point. And really that's workforce housing, as well as many people that aren't even employed at this point. So we're not necessarily trying to tackle that issue, but we are trying to create a lower point of entry for workforce housing. We want transit-oriented development. As Kathy mentioned, the project tackles issues of climate change. It's an all-electric project. It's solar ready. We're using green building materials. We are working with construction laminated timber, which is a material that we love. And our architect, Terry Green, is on the call with me today to answer questions relative to that material. We were kind of told we wouldn't be able to make it happen or make it cost effective. And it's honestly why we've put 18 months into the project before we shared it with you tonight. Is we wanted something that was really honest in its material presentation, that was cost effective, but we wanted a beautiful place for people to live, whether it was for a phase of their life or all of their life. And the unit sizes are around 350 square feet. We understand that that's kind of a small product, but in dealing with a smaller product, it's the way we're able to deliver the 148 units with all the amenities and services that are built in to really kind of create a inclusive community that whether you make $40,000 a year or you earn $200,000 a year, there's a place for you in our project. So as Kathy mentioned, we have 12-foot ceilings in these units. They each have a mezzanine deck that can be used for storage or a sleeping space. They have floor-to-ceiling glass. They have immediate adjacency to outdoor space. Every unit either has their own private balcony or a little patio space outside their front door. Yes, there is area in between the units where there's some fencing and there's kind of quiet spaces and meandering and a lot of investment in landscape, but there's also areas that the living community as well as the community can enjoy, like the outdoor picnic tables, the barbecue areas, the small dog park, the vegetable garden, meditation deck and yoga deck. And we are asking for a deviation to the parking. We feel that its proximity a block away from the state office buildings and so much work employment creates an opportunity for people truly to get rid of their vehicle. We also are providing with our all electric package EV vehicle charging and e-bike charging. We have a bicycle repair station. We're really trying to encourage people to get out of their vehicle and think more broadly. It's walkable to downtown or bikeable to downtown. And we just really feel like there's a good integration of indoor-outdoor experience and community experience provided in this little unique neighborhood. We're excited about the cross-laminated timber. We're excited to really showcase and use this project as kind of a teaching model for the community. The stormwater detention, we would really like to integrate signage and teaching moments into the project that really explain to people how they can help feel like they have some control over these big topics such as climate change and inclusive economy. And you know, these units will be renting at 75% of the median income level. So our units rent for $11.50 and for 122 of the units and $12.50 for 26 of the units, just because they're a larger square footage unit. In addition to the outdoor amenities, there's also a spin cycle room. There is a coffee klatch and meeting space for people who want to work from home. We're trying to design this space to be very COVID resilient. There is parcel lockers and on-site management. So we're really trying to be responsive and provide kind of a concierge level of service to folks. And we feel like it's a good youthful model. It's a great age in place model. And basically we've got some pretty lofty aspirations here, trying to deliver something unique for this project, but we're excited to bring it to West Sacramento, and we're open to any of the questions you have, and our architect, Terry Green with Williams and Padden, is also available to answer your questions. So whatever you might be curious about or have questions about or concerns about, we're here to address for you this evening and learn from you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Okay, I know there were several comments that came up or questions that came up. And so the public workshop is open. Would anyone like to start? Ms. Berliner, you had questions first. And so I think
I'm so ready for this. I am so excited for this project. This sounds amazing. Also, kudos on the EV charging. Very awesome. Very happy about that. But I do have a couple of questions. Are there going to be any accessible units? Because in the mock-ups, there was one with a loft, and I don't know if the smaller units are all going to have lofts and the larger units won't, but...
That's a great question. Actually, yes, there are 26 ADA accessible units on the ground floor. The other 26 units on, not quite 26, there's 22 units also on the ground floor that are ADA adaptable. Okay. Those units that are ADA adaptable do have the mezzanine level, but it's also something where if somebody wanted to put things in storage with the help in the event that they had some physical limitation, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't be able to make use of that space. It just might mean that it would need a little coordination, but we do provide 26 accessible units for the project.
Okay, great, thank you. And then my second question is about parking. So I'm very excited about the EV charging, but I am a little bit concerned about so little parking, not because I love driving, or a lot of people love driving. Just the fact that I know that that's a very, I know that parking isn't readily available for a lot of people. Parking isn't readily available in that neighborhood. So I'm just a little bit concerned about so few. You're saying how many spaces were you guys saying?
We have 39 spaces, and I feel you on that comment. Personally, I know that our region is going through growing pains and will continue to go through growing pains as we distance ourselves from the automobile. I think COVID has taught us a lot about remote working, and I think that I've been an early adopter of projects and really put my money where my mouth is when it comes to all electric projects as well as projects that don't include parking. I have a project in Sacramento currently where there's 12 residential units and there's actually 2 on-site parking places. And I think it's a difficult shift for people to make that the cost of an automobile might also involve the cost of parking, and that until we start kind of feeling a little bit of pain as vehicle owners, that maybe some of our transportation habits won't really change. We won't look for alternatives. So we're not so much trying to make it punitive by any stretch. We just feel like with the proximity to employment and the walkable and bikeable downtown, Zipcar and Lyft, bikes and scooters and car share programs, we just feel like we're putting the project exactly where the workforce resides. And I think a lot of us that have experienced working from home through COVID, I used to commute to the Bay Area prior to just really focusing on urban elements exclusively as of 4 years ago. And if I was working from home with COVID right now, I assure you, I would not be anxious to return to that commute to Emeryville, 4 days a week. And I think that employers generally are changing things that make things more flexible for people. So I don't know that that exhaustively answers your question, but
it gave me another question.
Okay.
Will there be, so you did mention car sharing, and I know that GIG will be around that area, but will you guys have any dedicated car sharing spots?
We will,
such as for Zipcar and...
Yeah, we've been working with GIG. I think it's GigCar. I'm sorry. I know it's a 3-letter word, and it's not a 4-letter word, a 3-letter word, and it's GigCar. And what we wanted to do is reserve on-site spaces for car sharing.
Okay.
And so we've been exploring that program with them.
Okay. And then my last questions, and I'll let everyone else ask questions. I was just really excited about all this. So I know that you guys will have, quote unquote, I know that the whole project is lower income, but will you have any designated units or specific number of units that are for lower income? So 40% median, 60% median income.
That's another great question. Yes, actually, we've worked through our development agreement with economic development, as well as the gentleman who chairs the affordable housing element within the city of West Sacramento. And we have made a reservation of 15% of our units to be tied to our development agreement to be in an affordable category. Just so you know, our rental rates by our own volunteerism in this program actually are less than what is prescribed in the program for affordable housing. So, I know this is a little bit of an out-of-the-box project, but we're really excited to experiment and put this on the ground in West Sacramento.
Well, thank you. I just love it. Thank you. Those are all my questions and comments.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next one that I saw with hands up first is Commissioner Sablon.
Thank you. So I do appreciate the amount of thought you've put into this project. It's clear from the sustainability to the affordability aspect. I just had one question on the studio units. I know aiming for the affordability, there's that balance of size and cost. Have you done any research, or I don't know if staff has done any research on demand for studio units? And
Actually, yes, I can address that question. Because my partner in the project is Fulcrum Property, they have immediate access to like leasing data relative to studios, and studio units are actually their first product to lease up. And so with our product being basically 75% of market rate for studio rentals, we're hopeful we can really address that need. But the other thing that's exciting to me about this attainable model as opposed to an affordable model is the distinction that, you know, in an affordable housing project, you have income caps on what you can do to retain your housing. And in our project, what we want is to really enable people to succeed. Like if we're kind to you by providing housing security, what kindness can you give to your community? Can you accept a job in nonprofit, you know, where possibly you're making less because you have housing security at a rate where it is attainable? And the difference with the attainable product is when you put yourself through college and you earn that extra $20,000 a year, you are not priced out of your home. You don't have to move. There's no income threshold. So the other thing I think that's really attractive about the inclusivity is there's nothing that says you make $150,000 a year, you can still rent a studio and choose to save money on housing. But how nice to have income diversity within an attainable project as well. I know that just as I was a much younger person and growing up, being able to interact with people that came from a variety of work backgrounds and success levels is a really motivating factor, I think, for people.
Yeah, thank you. And so are there other projects in the area, Sacramento area, where it's exclusively studios? Or is this?
None that I know of, and which is a really big reason why Mark and I are pretty excited about this one, because it seems to be filling a need that we've been hearing about really, as Mark will tell you, like in the product that they have, the studios go first. But when you're looking in Midtown and downtown in Sacramento across the river, it's also the product that really goes first. And a lot of it is the price point. So, you know, one of the things too, when you picture being in a space with a 12-foot ceiling, it's a very different experience than an 8 or 9 foot ceiling. The fact that when you look up, you see timber, TLT, as opposed to drywall. You know, we have really tried to think, you know, these are concrete floors. They really have a kind of a nice urban modern design to them that is very clean for a backdrop for the creative class. And the fact that you can throw open a door and step outside is huge, you know, especially I think through COVID.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like you've thought that through and done your research on that.
Well, we kind of have to. I mean, we don't want to fail. And so there's a reason that it's taken 18 months to really bring this forward. We've really tried to think through the details, and our architectural and engineering team has been invaluable in that process.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
Vice Chair Austin.
Yeah, hi there. So I have a comment at the end for city staff, but I'll start with the applicant. So a lot of this sounds really ambitious. It sounds a little too good to be true. But here's the thing. You've done some pretty incredible stuff in our region. So I really, first of all, want to thank the applicant for choosing West Sacramento. And this project checks all the boxes, but it's done in such a thoughtful way. So I really, really, huge kudos. Like I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I'll just make a comment about I myself was once an infill developer, and what we found was that although the project itself was a transit-oriented development directly adjacent to a light rail station, we found that while a third of our folks didn't use cars, a third of the residents didn't use cars, the majority of those folks didn't use transit. They walked and biked. So on one hand, a conversation that this planning commission has had is around, you know, hemming and hawing and saying, you know, do we have the transit options yet? And, you know, I'll tell you, I think that walking and biking, particularly for the populations that are going to be living here, will probably be a really significant factor. So I think that's really something for us to take seriously. And again, you know, your work has been really thoughtful, which includes, you know, looking at, you know, kind of bike parking and maintenance, but also EV charging and considering rideshare programs. So I think that's great. I think that there's a lot of thoughtfulness. I'll also note that people may not realize, you've mentioned this, that people may not realize how much design has gone into making a project like this feasible. And so I want to recognize that on one hand, I too have some concerns about the community impact for the reduced parking, especially that we're talking about like more than half of what would be typically required. However, the trade-off is an affordable product that is, aesthetically pleasing and has some nice open space that also can be kind of a communal space. So I think that there's been a lot of thought that goes into that. I will say that I don't want to go approving really substantial parking reductions willy-nilly, but there are enough things that make this project special, the dedication to sustainability, affordability, adaptability, that I really think that those trade-offs merit the requested parking reduction. I think those are some of the main things I wanted to mention, and then I'll just mention for city staff. I think this, if I might be wrong, but I think this is the third one that I can remember that's come before us. I think this calendar year, asking for some sort of accommodations for the Washington specific plan. So I'm wondering, and I'm also hopeful that we can make some updates to that so that it is not an additional barrier that great projects like this one, the cooperative one, and other infill projects have when they're trying to develop in the Washington neighborhood. So thank you, Ms. Young, for choosing West Sacramento and spending so much time being thoughtful on this development.
Thank you. And just anecdotally, I just want you to know that I really did put my money where my mouth is this year, and I gave up my car back in January because I wanted to challenge myself to really see, as a person who lives in Midtown, how frequently did I really need a car and what alternative means were there. So I really do try to walk the walk when we present things to make sure that they're livable and that we're not asking other people to do things that we wouldn't do ourselves. And you made some other comments about how important it is to actually get through the design process to know that you can deliver on your commitment. And this is where, like, our architectural and engineering team and our general contractor have been absolute heroes, because we vetted this cost process through 14 iterations of this design. And it is an exhaustive project, but when you say something as bold as, here's the rental rate, you have to work it back to the process of design. And so your comments are thoughtful, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
There are a couple of hands up, but Mr. Tilley, would you like to address Commissioner Austin's question about the Washington specific plan status before we move forward?
Yeah, so that is something we're actively working on now. We've released some of the key chapters on that project website now, which is planwashington.city. So that's available now. We are putting the rest of the pieces together, and I'm hoping, early next year that we can have a full draft that we can start bringing before the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sternfels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, city staff, for thinking about having us workshop this. And I agree with a lot of the comments of the other commissioners so far tonight. This is a really unique and interesting project, and from a policy standpoint, it ticks a lot of the boxes of the policy goals and things we've set out as a city as super important. It does that so well that it's kind of catching me off guard just by what it is, because it's so different from what we see. And so when I first saw the project, I was just kind of having a hard time wrapping my arms around just the thought of 350 square foot units in this one location, kind of what that looks like and feels like and operates, and how different it is from really anything else we have on this side of the river, and really anything on the other side of the river too, as far as like a single kind of area. And so I'm still having not a problem, but I'm still trying to figure out what does it really feel like. Pictures are always pretty and they're helpful, but I find when things are built, maybe sometimes things feel differently. And that's just a general comment that I would just kind of throw out there. It's not negative or positive, really, just something I'm struggling to wrap my arms around. from
we're sympathetic to that because we've really tried to put ourselves in the space. And I actually appreciate your comment because at the end of the day, you can tick all the boxes, but if it isn't livable, it really kind of doesn't matter. And that's why if you're curious to see, Terry Green, our architect, has actually loaded up on his computer the structural elevation so that you can see the mass timber in kind of real time. And even if it may not answer every question you have about the livability, it's really kind of fascinating from a design perspective, you know, that this engineering team has pulled this off. Like, I'm super proud of this, but also I got to give the city kudos. I mean, building and engineering and planning and economic development have been right there with us. And even the Washington Plan comment, like, they rapidly turned around for us, like the 4th Street profile, so that we could integrate the objective of where they're heading into our documents. And I am so grateful because they've got full plates. And for them to put the kind of attention that they have into this project to kind of serve the overall goals of attainable housing and climate change has been very impressive from a development perspective. So if you are curious about the actual structural plan, we can open that and show it to you today.
So that's a really good segue into my question / comment of real substance here. And that is, one of the things that caught me, I don't want to say by surprise by the project but I guess that's probably the best way to describe it, was that this project has a separate surface lot for the residents. I think everything we've approved in this area has either had like a pull-in little driveway or built-in parking underneath, or underground, like not underground, but surface level parking that was covered by units. And so this is going to be a bit of a different look when compared to other things we've approved on the parking front. And so I was wondering if you could just speak to the decision to move forward with a surface lot versus having the units spread all the way across the block and doing some parking underneath. And if there's pros and cons, would that allow you to have more parking spaces or not? Is there some serious cost implication?
Yeah, all of it. So yeah, you're spot on. We understand that the city would have a preference really not to have a seen surface parking lot. It would frankly be our preference too. And in spending, as I mentioned, the 14 iterations of both design and costing on the project to keep this in attainable and climate goals, we were kind of left with this tough scenario of how do we deal with the parking and what's the long-term game for the project. We went in very thoughtfully to heavily landscape this area and really create it to try to diminish in a way the appearance of parking. But also because of the physical way the buildings come together and the way they are positioned on the site, there's other thoughtful things that go into this, like all outdoor spaces north and south facing. So nobody is having their floor-to-ceiling glass in an easterly or westerly direction with the blazing sun coming in, where they basically get no benefit for their outdoor space. So the orientation of the buildings was again, the team experience in thoughtfully living in these spaces and understanding what the orientation needed to be to really capture the best living experience. And the parking lot for us, we see that as a measure we hope that you approve when we present it for the deviation, but it also is temporary. It's tied to our DA. At some point in time, we would like to look at that lot and develop a better parking solution and also potentially more attainable housing above the parking. So we feel like if we have the time to get the housing right, and get the product right, and deliver the community and the environment right, that we'd kind of like to sit with this and learn from it and take some more time with it, and then layer in some of those ideas that actually help solve parking, create more parking, but also make it disappear. So I know that was a long answer, but it's something we're very sensitive to.
No, it was thoughtful. I appreciated it. I think it's the one thing about the way the project presents itself that it was just kind of like, Like everything else is so great, and then there's like the surface lot there, and then we're still having to. There's a surface lot, and it's not enough to park projects by over half was kind of like a double whammy for me. And we've been pretty generous in this area already with parking and kind of giving folks less parking at their request than what it's zoned for, and so it's something that weighs on, I think, several of us on the commission when we have projects in this neighborhood now, because we've had several complaints from residents about there not being enough parking. And while I completely agree with your analysis on the future, and particularly with the market that I think this product would attract in terms of lifestyle and age and likeliness to have a vehicle, I still do worry about it a bit.
And again, just kind of anecdotally, for my Midtown project at 2417 J Street, where we have the 12 residential units, it's on the J Street corridor, so you can't actually street park. Mm-hmm. And of the residents that we have there, we've only had one person request a parking pass. So I know it's kind of hard to believe when you're in a forecasting mode, like how will things change? Will people start to really distance themselves from the vehicle? But I do feel it happening. Another thing that might be interesting to note, the people that have been coming in to occupy the other projects we have, it's Detroit, it's Seattle, it's Portland, it's LA, it's San Francisco. We have, at least in my view, a mini migration of people that are coming from much more dense urban areas. And they're not asking for the same set of like a person who's coming from the suburbs who thinks it would be cool to live in Midtown. They don't have the same criteria set.
Sure. That's fair.
Commissioner Sternfels.
Yes, Ms. Allen.
In terms of the parking, I just wanted to point out also this project is in very close proximity to the Ziggurat parking area, which the city now has controls, so that would be available for people to use if there ends up being an excess of 39 cars at the project.
Ms. Allen, since you brought the statement up, are you speaking specifically to the first floor metered spots the city has an agreement with? Or are you speaking to the entirety of the garage?
The entirety, I believe.
Katie, can you shed some light on that?
Yes, absolutely. So when the Ziggurat Garage was built, it was a partnership at the time, and the city contributed the land in exchange for certain parking rights in the structure, which up until about a year ago, we never exercised those rights. Now we have those rights. So we have full control of the first floor of the Ziggurat Garage all evenings from, I think it's 5 or 6 o'clock on until 7 o'clock in the morning, all nights, all weekends, all holidays. And in addition to those spaces that we control, which we are now leasing out on a monthly basis.
Sorry, can you just provide a point of clarity? Are you talking about the parking that is both gated and not gated?
I am.
Sorry, thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, the city has rights to the entire first floor, the ungated area and the gated area. The gated area, those are city-controlled spaces 24/7, 7 days a week. The entire first floor, the city controls all evening long, all weekends, all holidays. It took a while to work with the prior owners to reestablish the city's rights, but the city's rights were legally embedded in the agreement.
Well, I'd say that's really good news. Thank you for sharing it, Ms. Jacobs.
And Andrew, is that it?
Yes, it is. Sorry, that was it. Proper end.
Commissioner Leonard.
Thank you. Julie, excellent presentation and design. I can't compliment enough the extent you analyzed all aspects of the project. And so as speaking from a few different minds as a person who I've lived in San Francisco and Midtown and Capitol Yard right nearby there, and current resident of the Bridge District. Seeing the conflict or the fight over parking, also as a practitioner in the space with a mind to the future where transportation will change. I'm still, I see the ratio here, and it just gives me pause, only because the parking ratio to the number of units, only because as a resident of all of those spaces, I've experienced both car and carless living. And when it's been a lot easier to live that way when there are services immediately surrounding. And I'm sure you experience that in Midtown, where you're able to just walk out your front door to places. And we may believe in that ideal here in Washington eventually, but there's nothing right nearby. And so for today, it feels like a little bit of a challenge to have that big of a delta between the number of units and the number of spaces. But again, being mindful of the future and our climate goals and our transportation or the social change around transportation. I'm not sure where that puts the full viability of the project. And by no means am I an expert in this. You clearly demonstrated that. And so I just wanted to ask, between the ratio of parking to units, we also have a decreased, the request here is also to decrease the number of bike parking spaces. And so when you layer those two limitations on each other, I'm just curious from your expert perspective, what that might mean for a space like this that is somewhat isolated from immediately walkable services today, and how you feel as a project owner in the long term, like how you reconcile that, or what the story is between that delta and not having places to go like immediately around there. Does that question make sense? And
It does. And I understand what you're saying. I live in the Handle district in Midtown, and there are abundant amenities and services that are very close by. And, one of the things that was exciting to me about the area where we are proposing this project is, the proximity to 3rd Street and the small businesses that are in that area that in my mind are walkable, but I'm used to walking. And, Rayleigh Field and just like all these various amenities and services, I really feel like our project can be kind of a tether between, kind of linking what would be almost an old-fashioned Main Street by just putting boots on the ground. The other thing I really like about the parking garage is because I chaired the Alley Activation Alliance in Sacramento, where we were really identifying underused spaces and transitioning those into better uses. We created Liestel Alley, where Old Soul Coffee Shop is. And, we've really kind of challenged the notion of parking. And, what I love about the parking garage is the time of day use. I mean, it makes so much sense. If you build a parking space that's utilized during the day, the best possible use is that someone parks there at night. And because in our parking lot, we will charge for parking, and parking will be assigned to any vehicle that has a parking place, it's not going to be first come, first serve. It's going to be a cost to the vehicle owner to park in our parking lot. And we feel like we kind of have to start just addressing the issue of, look, you want an attainable housing, there's a compromise that goes along with this, and you need to be more of an early adopter of transit-oriented development. So it isn't that, we will own this property. We will own this asset for the long term. And so inviting tenants into the mix and creating an exciting living environment is enlightened self-interest for us. Like creating a problem that we have to overcome every day operationally is not in our own best interest. So we agree that we're kind of on the front end of this, but I kind of to the point that was made earlier, we feel like the trade-offs are pretty good. And, this is a kind of a deviation from the conversation of parking, but the level of thinking that's gone into the project is literally, can you fit a queen size bed on the mezzanine deck? And have we positioned the rails wide enough that you could actually tuck the sheets in on a queen size bed? So we've actually really thought through the details of the parking and those alternatives. And we're prepared to be in that conversation with the applicants, that come to the building. And I don't want to feel cocky, and I don't even feel like the word expert applies to me. We just work hard and we try to deliver something meaningful. But through all my experiences with the conversation of parking, I think some of it has been this perception that not only should I have a place to park, but it should be immediately outside my front door. And heaven forbid I have to go a block away to find a parking place. And I've lived in Midtown for a lot of years, both with my kids and, as the family and as a woman who was single. And so all the issues of personal safety and thinking about my kids and thinking about how we get groceries in and out of the house, it's amazing how quickly you adapt and find solutions when you're actually given the challenge. And I think it's a fair question that we ask our applicants whether or not they're bringing a vehicle with them and challenge them to have practical solutions, because, they may need to pay for parking at the Ziggurat building and help support city revenue through parking programs. It's something that happens in Midtown quite frequently. The whole Handle district uses the state office building parking garages for dining and restaurant use and things like that. So there are programs that are implemented elsewhere. And I feel like we can help lead the dialogue on those conversations. So we don't disregard your concern. We're not taking it lightly. But again, this isn't a project we're building to sell. We own the asset. We'll be managing the asset, and we have it for the long term. We inherit whatever we design and build.
One thing I've just noticed passing by the Gateway Affordable Housing Project, is that this seems to be an inordinate number of cars around there, and that noticing that maybe there's a relationship to some affordable product where people don't have the privilege to have an employment that is easily connected by transit. And in this area, we've got streetcar, maybe someday, and it's funded, but we've got a long way to go before then. But without any other services immediately around here, even if we're okay with the thesis that the reduced parking will work and that you'll have that conversation with your tenants, I would like to respectfully ask that you look at maybe finding some more space for bike parking, either long term or
I'm sorry. Yeah,
and bike share. And dedicated bike share stations. If you can get into the way the city operates its license with Lime Bike or whomever the operator is, to dedicate some more space in the project, not taking up more parking out on the street, but in the project for bike parking, both long-term and short-term. And, the thesis that people will just store their bikes inside their house, that's fine, but it's also, basically the size of a kind of a standard bedroom in some of these cases. And so that, finding a place to put the bike as your alternative transportation, in the number of years that passed before there's very good transit available here, it's just part of the area I'd like to just have a little bit more knowledge and understanding of.
You know what? I'm so sorry, because you asked that question about the bike parking earlier, and I just glossed right over that. With regard to the bicycle parking, one of the reasons why we didn't overly burden the exterior of the project with bike racks was my own experience in having two bikes stolen, one out of a bike locker and the other one, with double locks on it, parked downtown. And, I think that we have a really high, unfortunately, bicycle theft rate in our community. It's sad to see because so many people rely on bikes for transportation. It's why we put the bicycle repair, and we actually have electricity outside that anybody can use, not just our residents, for e-bike charging. But to your point about vehicle storage in the house, most everybody I know who has a bike is bringing it inside. And we agree there's not tons of room for that. But what we did, our solution as a family when we lived in Midtown and there were 4 of us and we had 4 bikes, was we put ceiling mount system in for our bicycles. And, we have the capacity to do that, and they're on a pulley and the bikes go up and down on the pulley system. I feel like we would embrace the challenge of alternative and attractive bike storage. I think most people just don't want their bikes stolen. Yeah. And so it's just a real factor in our community that we're dealing with.
especially if that's their only transportation. Again, in the number of years, if this moves forward right now, that if that is your only mode, you cannot afford to have that taken from you. But if there's any way to add some more space for that, either on the grounds or in a more protected space somewhere on the interior where you have the fences, possibly maybe some dedicated space for bike share or scooter share. I don't know. These are just thoughts. This is a workshop, and these are my initial impressions. Yeah. By no means, is it a dig on anything that you've done with the ratios? Just preliminary thoughts as we review this the first time.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Leonard. Commissioner Vu.
Thank you. And to address your...
I'm sorry, go ahead if you wanted to respond to...
I just wanted to let you know, too, that I have negotiated agreements on other projects with Jump Bike when Jump Bike was still in the area, and we're also completely open to having a dedicated station for shared EV bike systems as well. Excuse me.
Great, thank you. No, I just wanted to simply echo the thoughts and comments that have been previously mentioned. That this is a great project. I really appreciate the use of incorporation of solar. I think like Mr. Leonard, I have concerns about parking and just the challenges that area is facing right now. And granted, it is close to the parking garage, and I think that would alleviate a lot of concern and impacts. But at the same time, I think Mr. Leonard raises a good point about access to parking and cars for low-income folks, and perhaps they rely on that a lot more than non-low-income families. That said, I still think this is a great project. I love to revisit it when it gets around to taking a vote and a closer look into the project. I do have a question for city staff, and it's related to the question about parking and access by low-income families. Is there a program at all in the city, or that of that allows for discounted parking passes, or something similar like that for low-income families?
I know there are some programs available on those lines related to the Lime bikes, and I believe there's also a monthly availability in that format for VIA. So I'm not aware of that as it relates to actual, parking spaces, but there are other options that are available out there to persons, of lower income categories.
Okay, thank you.
I can just add to that, that currently our parking passes are at a very low, they're below market rate. We're charging between $30 and $50 a month for a pass in our city controlled spaces, both on street or in a surface lot. And that would be the same that we're charging in the Ziggurat garage. These 24/7 spaces that we have always had control over that we're beginning to now rent monthly, those would be more at $100 a month.
And is that then set by city council?
It is.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vu. Are there any additional comments? I do have a couple of questions and comments, and I'm hoping to kind of package up everything we've heard tonight. It was a lot, and unfortunately this meeting is being recorded, so I don't have to take complete notes on this. So first, I was happy to hear of the development team and Fulcrum Properties being involved. As soon as I heard that, my trust level goes up, and there's a little bit more confidence. One, because they are building, and we've seen similar products over in the Bridge District. In fact, I was super impressed with one of them. Now on that one, there's podium parking, but that's a great product. But we know that Fulcrum puts out outstanding products. So that definitely moved the needle into more of the comfort zone. But I could definitely sense that even with this group, there is some uncomfort with the parking request. And so on that, I was happy to hear about the ziggurat. When this does come back for a hearing, maybe we can expand on that just a little bit and hear a little bit more about some of the options. We have a couple other projects that we've also considered parking, like using those kind of facilities, and I'm sure we're going to max out on those as well. And the problem that has come up that sticks in my mind is, even if we don't use our cars, often people keep them and they just want to put them somewhere. And that's one of my concerns. Like, where do we put them? I have a car I pull out of my garage twice a week. You just move it out of the way. But that's all it's doing right now. And of course, one of the major concerns that we have is the impact on the surrounding neighborhood. And if we don't have parking on site, where do the cars go if they have cars? And the reality is, like, they can't just spill into the neighborhood, because that is an impact on the existing community. The transit-oriented development, obviously, everything is going hand in hand. We're trying to increase development, especially in the Washington area. And we have transit coming. Sometimes we're a little cart before horse. So I definitely appreciate your statement that, this needs to attract the early adapters for transit-oriented development. And yeah, you have to have that foresight of what this neighborhood is going to look like. The Washington area over at 3rd, that looked incredibly different 3 years ago. And just, a few, I know they seem like small changes, but they were huge for that neighborhood, and it increased the walkability of that neighborhood by several fold. And so I can see the future. We see a bunch of developments coming up. So I see it. It's still uncomfortable. So and I appreciated the comments about the bike parking as well. And also potential options for development of the surface parking lot. I like that idea. You have an amazing piece of property. This is one of my favorite pieces of property, is right in the middle of the Washington area. And we've seen other proposed developments on this property before. The developer of the Good project had something here, and it was amazing. And I just know that the economics wouldn't allow for it right now to be built, because it was also podium parking. I think in the future, hopefully there are some options to go up and include parking. Thank you for addressing accessible units and affordability. I know on our both mayoral and city council forums recently, affordable housing, and not just the quote unquote affordable housing, has been a key topic. And I know people are interested in more affordable units, and having smaller units actually makes it affordable for especially our younger generation. So, okay, I think hopefully I was able to capture everything. I do have a couple of very specific questions. The project is solar ready, but you're going to maintain it and hold on to it and own it. Why is it just solar ready instead of having solar?
Frankly, it's a cost issue, and we've looked at this project really intensely in the last 60 days from the perspective of challenging our team to figure out the delta between the project today and actually getting to net zero, not just like solar power, but full net zero project. And we did a very deep dive into that analysis to figure out the burden to the project cost-wise and then the outcome to the residents. And the reason we're making it solar ready, and we are a long-term owner, is because we feel like innovation is going to continue to rise up to meet us, and we want to be ready for it when we can get more out of the product. If I covered our entire rooftop currently with solar, it would not meet the demand of the 1600 amp power requirement for the project. And so then we really studied where else could we put solar, like speaking of the parking area and everything else, like just really how far could we get with this? And frankly, right now it's a cost issue. We want to be teed up for the innovation. We want to be able to implement it when we're ready. As we've all kind of acknowledged, this is an innovative project where we're trying out a different model. We want it to succeed. And it's much easier to layer in something when you've built a successful model. And we owe it to the whole team on this call to prove it. We're believing in the smaller footprint. We're believing in attainable housing that is reachable for a point of entry for workforce. We believe in the amenities and services we're providing, and we think the project is going to age well and get better. But if we tried to do it all in, we wouldn't be hitting these marks. And I think we've just got to kind of rest at some point and say we can go this far with it and continue to keep our commitment for everything we've said relative to pricing and inclusivity. So for us, we've just had to hit the pause key there, but we're open to it, and we have no problem continuing to invest in our asset.
Okay. Again, this is a workshop. Thank you so much. There were a lot of comments this evening. Interesting. There weren't a whole lot on the design of the building, so I did hear positive feedback on that. And there's trade-offs, and I definitely see the economic price point that you're going for, and I can see the trade-offs in the building. As far as like the structure, normally having one straight structure that's 160 feet long would make me very nervous. But I do like how you offset it, how it's not just a straight wall, how the balconies help soften that look. It's not just a wall, and of course the center courtyard area being vegetated also helps. So. You've done a lot to help soften what could be a very just big, bulky building, and I'm interested to see how it comes along.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, unless there are any other comments, I'm going to close the public comment period. And let's see, Ms. Allen, do you know when this is coming back to us?
Yes, we plan on coming back for the public hearing November 5th.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Young, for your presentation. Okay, moving on. The last item on the agenda tonight is number 5, the Housing Element Subcommittee report. And let's see, I don't see Raul on the phone or on the meeting tonight. So either Aria, Bernadette, or Andrew. Maybe one of you want to kick it off?
Or perhaps I could interject. I left this on the agenda just to try to keep this on as a front burner item for the commission. We talked about it quite a bit at our last meeting, and I know later this month there will be another meeting of the Housing Commission involving our subcommittee, which I believe is when they're scheduled to take action on it prior to coming to Planning Commission. So, this is a forum to go over any matters on that, especially for our subcommittee members. They can take with them to the Housing Commission meeting. But if there certainly is no requirement to delve into this, any more than is needed this evening. But I wanted to keep that option open for the commission should you wish to discuss anything related to housing element.
All right, thank you. So if there's anything to report, just let us know if the commission would like to pass along anything to the subcommittee. Speak up. Seeing nods. Okay, we'll move on, and that concludes the regular agenda. So moving on to general administration function part 2, informal discussion.
I'll just chime in. The end of the year, we tend to see some holidays creeping up. So you all do a pretty good job of just keeping us apprised of any cancellations. But are we anticipating some of those major banking holidays to be off?
I can tell you right now that we will definitely meet for our 2 meetings in November, and likely and then our first meeting in December. Right now, our second meeting in December is probably the one that I would love to see if we can get all of our business done at over our next couple of meetings, so that we don't need that second December meeting. But we will be meeting our second meeting this month in 2 weeks, and then definitely both November meetings and the first December meeting.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you so much.
Anybody else? Okay, with that, I will go ahead and close tonight's public planning commission meeting. So thank you. Everybody stay safe and have a good evening.
Thank you, Chair Liebig.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.